Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about my YouTube hypothesis here, and it's a working hypothesis that really began with a pretty simple question. And I wanted to begin exploring the ways that these platforms moderate culture and the tools that they use and the tools that we use, how they shape what I have termed, if you read my hypothesis, expression spaces. Okay, so this is going to deal a lot with how creators are affected by the algorithms on the various platforms. And I'm not just going to single out YouTube here, because these aren't just online stages where people happen to post things and do entertainment. They are not. They are very sophisticated businesses. These things are very complicated. They're living environments, and they're made from platform rule changes and algorithm changes and consumer behaviors and patterns and all of this. And I think if you go back and you take a 50,000 foot view of this thing all the way up to the very top levels, you see that this is an incredibly complicated thing. And you can understand how this changes the behavior of not only the creators, but of the consumers as well, of society as a whole. This is a very, very, very dangerous thing that we're dealing with. And then I think enters the room, right? So I mean, we have to let me back up a little bit. We have to take into consideration the cultural moderation, right? The rules, the filters, the policies, the algorithm itself, right? We have to take all of this into consideration, because as much as they claim freedom, they still set boundaries on what can and what can't be said, right? And they look very different depending on what community you're dealing with, right? So it's true. All of these rules change depending on what community is watching the video. Now, I've played around with YouTube as both a hobbyist and as a professional, and as a journalist. But now as a researcher, I begin to look at this and I think, well, why does one video that I post reach thousands of people? Another video that I post may only reach a couple of dozen people. The easy answer to that, if I go to like vidIQ and I go to Think Media and I go to these different places, all of these experts who claim to be able to help you build your channel, if I go and I listen to this, right, the easy answer is, well, the algorithm. It's showing your videos to this group of people. It thinks that you like this, and you don't know your audience, and you need to niche down and all of this. You need to follow this direction. It's very vague information. If you listen to it, and I'm not picking on Sean Cannell and Think Media at all, but if you listen to it, it's all very vague information disguised as being deep philosophical. It's a sales game. It's a sales pitch. And the educated consumer recognizes that as a sales pitch. But I think then you have to enter this conversation of how these things change depending on the community that it's being showed to. And that's something that you really don't have a lot of control over. Now, some of you will rebut and say, well, yeah, I do have a lot of control over that. I'm not sure that you do. I'm not so sure that you do. Then I think you have to look at like these something you'll hear me discuss a little bit later on, is platform affordances. What do they afford you? These design features and algorithmic levers, right? Like ranking, visibility, and even reduction mechanisms, right? That are built into the design that quietly shrink a post's reach from several 100,000 to almost none without removing the video altogether from the platform. And this steers by this is the steering device, right? The steering wheel that decides who sees the video. This is a very complicated machine. So I think when you put this all together, a lot of people will say this is content management. I'm going to stop you right there. You get a whole expression space, right? That shifts landscapes constantly, where creators are trying to balance authenticity with survival. And that's why we get so many of these videos that seem to be copycats of each other, right? They're just repeat, and repeat, That's why. And if you read one of the essays that I wrote, and I'll try to link that down in the description, I'm using the example of whether Van Gogh's Starry Night could be painted today. Whether Van Gogh could have made this. Or would have gone to Instagram and found out that, hey, this is the color palette that's trending today. This is the filter that's trending today. This is the brushstroke that's trending today. And he would not have ended up with a truly original work of art, but rather a cheap imitation of what everybody else is currently doing at that time. And when I was always talking with my journalism colleagues, I used to tell, they always used to say, well, we're following the trend. We're following the trend. You hear that amongst media consultants a lot. We're following the trend. And they always, when you say, well, I'm not worried about the trend, I think we should be setting the trend, not following it, right? Let's be a trend setter. Well, I can't do that. Why can't you do that? Well, because if I do, then nobody will like it. Nobody will watch it. That right there kills the creativity. That right there kills the creativity. And the second you deviate from this, you end up with what I'm talking about here in my working hypothesis. This whole thing becomes a big jumbled mess. And why does this really matter? You're probably asking yourself, why does this really matter? And I think as scholars, as academics, as people who study this research that I'm currently engaging in, it fills a gap in platform studies by moving beyond just very static snapshots, very still pictures, and it moves into the model expression spaces. And we start to look at them as these co-adaptive cycles, right? That are constantly shifting and serving as these feedback loops, right? And they often shift amongst communities as well. Now, if you're a creator, this thing offers a more honest map, I think, about what success really is, and that it's not about analyzing all of this data and cracking the algorithm once and for all. Listen to me, it's about expecting instability and planning for it. That's what this is. It's expecting instability and knowing how to plan for it. If this is going to be your job, if this is going to be your life, you need to understand that YouTube is and all of these social media platforms are incredibly inconsistent. I used medium.com for quite a long time. I did a lot of blogging and writing on medium.com. And I made a pretty decent amount of money on there every once in a while. But it was incredibly inconsistent. That tells me that their algorithm is out of whack. Their distribution algorithm is out of whack. But I'll go back to this, to the reasons why I'm doing this, is the last thing that we take into consideration here is the industry and the policymakers. We have to be able to influence them, because this research that I'm looking at here, it's going to sharpen the stakes a little bit. It's going to really put the nails in the coffin, so to speak, about moderation rules, about algorithm tweaks. And I'm not just talking to adjust the engagement here. No. I'm talking about reshaping complete cultural ecosystems and determining, these platforms determine which voices survive and which voices die, right? And which ones may never even get heard because the algorithm doesn't like it, right? So I think that what we're doing here with this hypothesis is we're reframing the expression spaces, right, as being very unstable but very navigable environments. They're unstable, but we can navigate them if we're smart. So what we're doing here throughout this whole project is we're inviting people to think differently about how YouTube actually works. And I'm not a YouTube consultant. I only have a few thousand followers on YouTube. Excuse me. And these platforms are not just neutral pipes, okay? They're not just these very fair pipes. And the culture isn't just raw material that's flowing through these pipes, right? This is a very fluid product that is very difficult to navigate. And when you put all of this together, platforms like YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, they're very evolving terrains where authenticity is always, always, always up for grabs. Always. And understanding that, I think, is key if we want to be resilient, if we want to be diverse in the type of art and content that we create, and we want to be genuinely creative people, figures, right? So that's what this whole thing is about. And when you look at this, the title of my working hypothesis is Cultural Moderation, Platform Affordances, and Expression Spaces. Where do these things fit in to our world? Where do these things fit in to the algorithm? And if you're a creator, or you're a scholar, or you're somebody in industry and policy, we need to be looking at these real data sets. Not just arguing over the algorithm and not just arguing. The reason Mark Zuckerberg didn't have an answer for Congress was because he has no clue how the algorithm works. I'm convinced of this. And nobody within these companies has a clue. So I don't know if the answer is you go back and scrap the whole thing and you got to start over. I don't know if that's the answer. I don't even know if you could at this point. I don't know. I think there's a lot. That's the beauty of a working hypothesis, right? Is you collect all this data, you analyze all this data, you put all this stuff together, and you come up over months, years, whatever, with a real answer. And you try to silence the noise. So what I'm trying to do here is bring you into the conversation and talk to you a little bit about what I'm doing, what I'm working on. There's actually very, very, very little research and scholarly work done on this thing. There's plenty of consultants out there, sign up for my platform, selling you all of this. You have to silence that, put it behind you. These guys, like, again, and I'm not picking on Sean Cannell and Think Media or vidIQ or any of them, but you have to put them out of the equation, right? Because they're just sounding boards. They're just megaphones for a sales funnel, right? And you just have to take them for what they are, tidbits of a little bit of advice and nothing more. And I think you have to do that with anybody who's claiming that they understand or can help you build your channel, because I think if you look at the real data from this, from all of this, right, less than 10%, probably closer to about 4 or 5% of the people who actually pay for these services actually see any type of real success, measurable success. So the success that they get is pretty small for what they pay for. Right, and then so many of them end up leaving the ecosystem as it is, and that's what you need to try to avoid. You need to try to avoid getting sucked into these traps, and not that they're intentionally trying to trap you. That's not what I don't think that's what they're trying to do. I think they're just trying to make a buck however they can make a buck. That's the truth. So by taking a little bit more scholarly approach and a little bit more academic approach to this, I think we're able to understand these systems a lot better, and why some YouTubers or some creators or whatever are here one day and gone the next, and why you see them so much in your feed one week and then next week you don't see them. There's some questions to be answered here, a lot. And I think that this framework, I really believe in this framework, and I put a lot of time working and thinking about this hypothesis. And that's what I want to get with today, is open the discussion up to you as creators, as people who want to create, as consumers. I want to know what you think about this, what your experiences have been, where you're at with all of this. And I think we need to have logical conversations about it. Thanks for watching.